A portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Lots on the big program. Lots to start with. The Donald evidently looking forward to testifying to the Mueller Commission. I don't know anyone who rationally would be looking forward to testifying under oath, but hey, I'm hoping he does, and I'm hoping that he acts just like himself. Be yourself, relax, don't prepare, don't do any of that. You're just fine. Just fine. Go in there and do what you do. If the reports of his past testimonies are, being deposed or any indication of what this will look like, it should be a very entertaining program. And I'm looking forward to the entertainment. I hope they televise it. There's part of me that says I hope they put it on pay-per-view. We can maybe pay for some of the things that we're destroying. Interesting. Now, again, tomorrow I'm fully expecting them to walk this back. Someone's going to whisper in his ear, hey, that's a bad idea. And he'll come out tomorrow and say, no, what I meant is no way in hell I'm going to testify. So, again, this is how the administration works. And just so you're prepared, want to make sure that when the tweets come out, you'll go, hey, Rick was right. Look what he did again. Not surprising. Now, here's the thing. The investigation is getting closer. I mean, at some point it's going to come to a conclusion. And I'm hoping, well before this, right around summertime, it'd be good. Because maybe we'd have all the information come election time, maybe stop some of the Russian interference. Because we know they're interfering in things that are going on right now. For instance, the number one bot issue over the past couple of days because of the shutdown, the Russian bots were just all crazy with hashtag Schumer shutdown. Not surprising. And you go, well, gee, how do some of these right-wing radical, how do some of these hashtags get to the trending level? Russian bots. And I've got friends who do the digital stuff, and they're telling me this is what they're doing. And you could almost see what the Republicans are going to do a couple of days in advance. In fact, we had David Yankovich on the other night, and he was explaining, going, look, you just read what the Russian bots are throwing out, and it's interesting how it coordinates. Now, is it that there's coordination going on between the Republican Party and the Russians? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's awful curious that they're saying the exact same thing. So let me repeat that. It's awful curious that they're saying the exact same thing, that the Russian bots throw things out there, the trial balloon folks, and it ends up in the rhetoric of Republican politicians. Just one of those really bizarre things. And, at some point you got to go, there's something going on. And maybe our government should get, maybe, just a thought, maybe we should get into it. Maybe we should figure out what it is. And, I don't know. Maybe try and figure out how to, stop it. Just a thought. Maybe. Because understand, and this is where I tell my Republican friends, understand, live by the sword, die by the sword. And the bots could change on you tomorrow. And this is where I'm keep coming back to. This investigation is really important. And I know, the right wing screaming, there's a coup, it's a witch hunt. It's important to know that ballot box, that the sanctity of that ballot box is whole. That when you cast your ballot, you believe that it's going to be counted. That you believe that it matters, and you believe that we are being governed by the will of we the people. And yet, it seems to me at every turn you've got Republican politicians and their policymakers figuring out how to fiddle with that faith. Because look, I go and I do this exercise every time I go to vote. They take me to this machine. They put in a little thing and they say, okay, go vote. I go, well, how do I know this is being counted? Well, it's being tabulated on the central BCU and I get this whole explanation. I go, well, how do I know that? And how do I know once I push the button, everything's going on inside to cast my ballot? I have nothing in my hand that I can go, this is it. Common sense would tell you. This is one of those bizarre things where you go, here's a thought. I go to the ATM machine. I get a receipt for my transaction. I know the machine can do it. In fact, the same companies who make the ATM machines seem to make the voting machines or have their hand in it. So it seems like you should be able to, without much of a problem, to put a roll of paper in there and spit out my vote and go, okay, yep, that's right. And without putting numbers on it, without putting identifiers on it, drop it into a box on your way out the door. Have someone go, make sure you drop it in the box so that if there is question, you can go to the box and you can go, okay, hand count. And maybe we should have a system where the machines give us the preliminary results. That the real count should be what's on paper, what we, the voter, have verified. Maybe just a thought. And I know I get into some of these rants, on voting rights fairly often, but understand the entire faith of this government, the entire legacy of this country is in that box, is in that faith that our elections aren't rigged, aren't tampered with, aren't stolen, aren't gerrymandered, aren't, colluded and meddled with. And I'll tell you right now, more and more people are losing that faith. And then you have a president who, look, I said this from the beginning. If I were President Trump, the first thing I would have done taking office is I would have said, look, we did nothing. I have nothing to hide. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Instead of putting the Kobosh Commission in place to find the mysterious voter fraud that they never seem to find anyone, instead of that witch hunt, I would have made a commission to go, look, we're going to find out who did what, why, when, and how. And we're going to be open and transparent. We're going to get to the bottom of it because we did nothing. If the Russian bots were helping us and the Russian bots were echoing things that we were saying, we have to figure out how that stops. But we did nothing. We're going to get to the bottom of it. They didn't do that. What they did was they complained that it was a witch hunt. And they complained that, it's fake news. Understand, a growing number of people are now going, hey, there's there. And I remember right at the beginning, go back to just before the election. We were talking about this. You talk about on election day. This is what we talked about on election day. This is what we talked about on inaugural day. And the number of people who are going, oh, you're just crazy. You're just sore losers, all down the line. I'm going, no, there's something here. And we need to be the ones to say, it's here and fix it. And the hope is that Mueller does some of this. But also it's got to be our government. There've got to be hearings. And the sad reality is they're so entrenched in their sides that I don't know that we can have an open, transparent hearing process given what's going on right now. And I look at this Nunes memo, and I've had a bunch of people go, well, why don't they release the memo? I go, one, it's cherry-picked information. This is Nunes going, I'll take a little bit of this, and we can take this out of context, and we can take that out of context, and we can sprinkle a little of that, and a dash of that, and a piece of that, and a teaspoon of this over there, and you got this poisonous stew. All in a nice 4-page memo that is basically his wanton wish. And he won't even let people on the Senate Judiciary, on the Senate Intelligence Committee see it. How? You got to wonder. What are they hiding? I know there's a secret society. It's crazy, just plain crazy. Here's what we know, though. The investigation is getting closer to Trump. We know that. There's going to be an interview. And I know the Trump people are trying to, we need the rules, I think is how Trump put it. We need to put rules down. No, there's no rules. When you sit down, you tell the truth. When you put your hand on that Bible, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God. And either you tell the truth or you don't, like Jeff Sessions didn't. Perjury. You should be going to jail. We also know that Mueller has investigated and has interviewed a ton of fairly high-ranking folks. I mean, we just found out Sessions was interviewed. The director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, was interviewed. CIA director Mike Pompeo was interviewed. Even Sally Yates was interviewed. It's a lot of big names. And the thing is the more this tightens, I think the more erratic you're going to see Trump get. And I really can't wait till the day after he testifies to see what kind of idiotic Trump tweets come out. That will be one of those things that you go, he screwed up and he knows it. So I'm looking forward to it. Maybe we should have watch parties. We should demand that it be televised. We should demand that. Yeah, we need that, or at least have access to it some way or another. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Greg Palast is going to be here talking about, is the attack on the voting box dead with the expiration, the destruction of the Kobach Commission, or are they just going to go another direction? Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
People own 90% of the wealth. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1874. That was the day Arturo Alfonso Schomburg was born. Schomburg was an important figure in the Harlem Renaissance. He is also considered a premier historian and collector of material on black life in America. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, he arrived in the United States in 1891 and soon settled into the Cuban and Puerto Rican working class neighborhoods of New York City. Schomburg initially involved himself in the Cuban and Puerto Rican independence movements. When he traveled to New Orleans, he experienced Jim Crow discrimination and witnessed black disenfranchisement firsthand. He reacted strongly to the increased racial tensions, lynchings, and race riots of the period, and believed that history must restore what slavery took away. In 1911, Schomburg and his friend John Edward Bruce founded the Negro Society for Historical Research, and established lasting friendships with intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois. He worked for the inclusion of black history into the educational system and continued to amass a wide collection of literature, art, books, pamphlets, and manuscripts on black life and history. His collection spanned materials from across the globe. It included letters of Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, poetry by Phyllis Wheatley, artifacts from Frederick Douglass, and other black leaders. Schomburg's private collection became the basis for the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library's Division of Negro Literature, History, and Prints, which opened in 1925. The division served as a pivotal resource for Harlem Renaissance writers, poets, and artists. Known today as the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, it is recognized as the leading repository for materials and artifacts on black cultural life. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
The only way that guy ever becomes governor of Pennsylvania is if they continue to have voter ID and they could rig the whole thing. Mike Turzai, Speaker of the House here in Pennsylvania. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. And yes, he is. He's running for governor, as I understand. Thank goodness, no more voter ID here. But there are going to be other suppression tactics. Trust me. News reports this week came out that evidently, according to the Government Affairs Committee, the so-called Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity that was dissolved by Trump at the beginning of the year by executive order, the same way he brought it into life, evidently was asking the state of Texas, not just for their data, their voting data, like they did to every state, and most states said, no, it's not going to happen. They wanted specific data on anyone with, well, Hispanic surnames. And they paid for it. They paid about $3,500 for 49.6 million voter records that the White House is now claiming they didn't get because evidently a bunch of those busybody voting rights groups filed lawsuits and blocked it. But you think about it, this was the mindset. We're going to go after that group. We're going to target them. Now, what you've got is on January 3rd, Trump did sign an executive order shutting the commission down, claiming that, he decided to because the states didn't want it. And they refused to hand over the data. And I'm not buying it. And I don't think anyone else should. And I don't think my next guest buys it very much. That's why I've asked Greg Palast to come talk with us. He's a Puffin Foundation Fellow in Investigative Reporting, the author of New York Times bestsellers, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, and The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Let's not forget the movie, the fantastic movie, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be with you, Rick, and no, I don't buy it. Not in the least.
But they shut it down, Greg. It's Kobosh is done. The commission's done. It's all gone.
Okay, here's the deal. This is the commission, it's everyone called the Voter Fraud Commission, run by Chris Kobach of Kansas. And if you can't remember that, just remember KKK. KKK of Kansas pitched this not as a commission to Trump. And this is what we're getting back to is his original secret plan. And how do I know his secret plan? Because even though the guy went to Oxford and Yale, when he had his meeting with Donald Trump, his confidential memo, he was holding it in his hands while the AP reporters are taking pictures, and you could see his memo with lines from it, which you blow up 100 times, and you could see part of what he was doing. Here's what he wanted to do. Well, number one, he wanted to be the deputy chief of Homeland Security, and the chief said, nah. But he said, let's set up this operation within the Department of Homeland Security. And that's what they're doing now. Because, see, he was hit. His commission on so-called voter integrity sent out requests to every state to hand over your voter files and all the related information, party and right. Et cetera. We'll get to the special thing with Hispanics. That's the real danger. But what they were... there's some baloney in that, but what happened was they also had all kinds. What was this group doing? What were they going to do with the files? When were they meeting? How were they operating? So you had all of these groups, like Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law, fancy name, but it's all the civil voting rights lawyers, filed lawsuits saying, we want to know what you're doing. It is a government commission, and we are a government of the people, and under the freedom of information, remember those two words, freedom and information, you've got to turn this stuff over to us. He not only wouldn't even turn over what they were doing in secret, one of the people that sued for information was the one Democrat on the committee. Kind of not the brightest bulb in the socket, but he finally figured out they weren't even telling him when the meetings were going to be.
Wow.
They weren't telling him what the staff was doing. They wouldn't tell him who was on the staff. They wouldn't tell him nothing, and he's the commissioner. He was their window dressing, say it was bipartisan because he's the one Democrat, and he went along with a lot of their junk. Now, if you want to know about Chris Kobach of Kansas, first of all, thank you for mentioning the film The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which this week, is finally out in a brand new post-election Trump Stole It edition on Amazon, free on Prime. And you can get it there or go to gregpalast.com. The thing is, the reason I tell you to do this, I don't make money off this. I have a foundation. It's all donated, all proceeds. But here's the deal. What I did is I actually got a lot of KKK's, Chris Kobach of Kansas's inside documents, and I confronted him. I flew to Wichita, Kansas with a combat photographer from Europe that I brought, and we got into a Republican fundraiser and in a Wichita park. It was an ice cream fundraiser. It was only vanilla, by the way, as you can well imagine, and confronted him with his documents. I disguised our group as a local news crew and finally literally grabbed his hand. And you'll see the confrontation. Here's what this guy is doing. Here's why he wanted the lists, Rick. Kobach runs an operation called Interstate Crosscheck. And what he does is he takes lists of voters from all the states that joined. There are 29. There's only 2 Democratic states left. It's basically all Republican states. And they share voter rolls. What does he do with the voter rolls? He looks for double voters. He says there's as many as 3 million people voting twice. Now, how many has he arrested? I don't know. There's been about 4 people caught in the last decade out of 1 billion votes cast, right? It's not that difficult to catch. Like he himself said, it's really easy to catch double voters. But why hasn't he caught any?
Yeah, if you only got 4 over the last decade, that doesn't seem like a high rate.
Yeah, but here's what he is doing. Are you ready for this? And I don't know, the mainstream press hasn't covered this. 1.1 million voters were removed from the voter rolls before the 2016 election by this system. 1.1 million voters. Now, if it was random, it wouldn't matter. But here's how they make the matches to see if someone is a double voter. They match the first name and the last name, and that's it. So that means if your name's Jose Garcia or David Lee, Asian American, right, or John Johnson, African American. So 85 of the 100 most common names in America, last names in America, according to the census, are minority names. 85 of the top 100. That's the history of slavery and colonialism. So Rodriguez, Garcia, like we had experts go through and said, if your name's Joe Garcia, I have an expert in the film, say, hey man, you're suspected of voting in 29 states. And that's it. And you can lose your vote. Now, you don't lose it automatically. You get a postcard, and if you don't send in a postcard. So he really does have a list of 3 million people. I'm the only journalist who has the list, by the way.
Wow.
They try to deny it to me.
Am I on the list? I mean, because Rick Smith is a fairly common name.
I have zero doubt. I'll look at it in a minute, actually.
Because I've got to imagine there's a Rick Smith in every state in this country.
Are you a legal Rick Smith or Richard Smith?
Richard Smith, either way.
Okay, doesn't matter. I'll look for both, because a lot of people have used the Rick as well. Oh, yeah. So what's happening is, but mostly it's voters of color. So you got about 1.1 million voters who were knocked out, mostly voters of color. That means, and their color is blue, right? They're Democrats.
Right.
Asian Americans, by the way, in my film I have Asian Americans dancing Gangnam Style. There's an Asian rights voting group, and they're doing this like Gangnam Style dance. And pop, 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 they turn into John Lewis. So in my film, you can actually see John Lewis dancing Gangnam Style. But the point was that Asian American voters are suddenly voting like they've turned black. That's 75% voting for Democrats and voted against the Trumpster. So they're going after Asian Americans. What better way than common names? You know, Lee, Chung, you know, it's Kim, Ho. It's, you know, so it's an easy way to get after them. Rodriguez, Garcia, like I say, that it's easy. And then African American names, forget it. Black, Johnson, Jackson. Washington, 94% of people named Washington are African American. And so you're knocking off these voters. That's his game, okay? So he wanted to use the power of his federal office to get the list from the 21 states which had not given him the list. And so what happened, by the way, all these supposedly 44 states wouldn't give him the list. Most of them are lying, just so you know. Most of them were completely lying. The governor of Mississippi, the governor of Louisiana, Republicans, said, oh, we would never give away our voter list, because even the right-wing shows got really, really upset that they were giving away people's private data.
Right. As
but what they didn't say, is that they'd already sent this, that they had already sent the list to Kobach, and he was using them. I have Kobach's list. I will say one thing, Kobach, he wouldn't give me the names, but he gave me the list. I confronted him with this stuff. I said, how come John Edward Johnson is tagged as the same voter as John Thomas Johnson? How are John Edward and John Thomas even conceivably the same voter? You know, and no one had seen his list. Okay, so in the film, by the way, I use animations. I literally dive into the list. You get to see the list. But I confront Kobach with this stuff and the other games he's playing. And that's where we get to the Hispanic list. Ask me about that.
I'm going to ask you about that. Why are they targeting specifically Hispanics in Texas?
Okay. Here's the deal. Kobach has also made the claim with Donald Trump, with Agent Orange, that there were 1 million people who crossed the Rio Grande to vote for Hillary, that you have this massive number of Hispanics voting, you know, aliens voting in our elections.
We got a bunch of people running across the desert to cast a vote and then running back.
Yes, and even better, here's someone in the country illegally, and the first thing that they do is give you their name, address, and then show up at a certain time at the polls. Yeah, right. So now, but it would be a joke. And see, the thing is, what I hate is the mainstream media does pick up that part of the story, and they laugh at Kobach. They make fun of him like he's a fool. Well, like I say, Oxford, Harvard, Yale, no fool, okay? Let's be careful with this guy, with KKK. Here's his program. What he wanted to do at Homeland Security is get the names of all deportees, people that have been sent back, and believe it or not, a lot of them are named Jose Garcia, Rodriguez, Eduardo Rodriguez, etc. Though, by the way, most of the new undocumented workers are Asian American, but still, same thing with the game. Okay, with the names.
Right.
But mainly
so
they're going after
what you're saying then is, anyone who we've deported, everyone left in the country with that name, we're kicking you off the list.
You got it, baby. That's the whole plan. That they'll take a name like Jose Garcia and they'll find Jose Garcia on the voter rolls of Texas, and they will then say, that's the same guy. And what they do is they did it before. They've tried this before, just so you know. In Florida, they accused, are you ready, 181,000 people with Hispanic surnames as alien voters, potential alien voters. They say, oh, no, we're not stopping them from voting. They only have to go into court with proof that they are Americans, and then they can vote. Now, can you imagine? We actually had people, I've talked to them. We had people like this guy Morales, who was a Marine, and they said, well, you have to prove you're American. We don't have citizenship cards in America. Sorry, it's not Red China, right? So how do you prove you're American? We don't have citizenship cards. Social Security, driver's license, they don't count. You can be an alien. In fact, you have to, if you drive and you're an alien, you better have a driver's license. And you better, if you work, you have to have a Social Security card. But so that's not your proof of citizenship. It's got to be your original birth certificate, or if you came over and were naturalized or something. But it's pretty hard to prove you're an American, a passport. And how many people have that, right? Certainly not how many, Republicans at the country club have passports, but homies, or people in the barrio, not a lot, okay? Now, so you have to prove and you have to take a day off from work to go to court. Can you imagine 181,000 people accused They did find an illegal, and they convicted and gave a 10-year sentence to one single alien, an Austrian registered as a Republican. I kid you not. And thank God the Obama administration, Attorney General Holder, stopped this ugly, racist, anti-Hispanic, basically registration program that they were running in Florida. But now, who is supposed to protect those Hispanic voters under the law? Jeff Beauregard Sessions. Good luck, my friend. And that's why Kobach is still dangerous. And what he's done is, I think it is a great win for Progressive that they had to disband that piece of crap commission.
Right,
However, they hid most of its operations, as Kobach originally suggested, in the Department of Homeland Security. But here's one thing, Rick. You can stick stuff into the Department of Homeland Security, and you can think that just Kobach likes to operate like a bat in the dark, and he thinks that no one's going to get the information. I got news for you. I've filed Freedom of Information requests on Homeland Security, on FBI, on CIA, and unless you can't claim something as secret national security. You cannot remove Hispanic Democrats from the voter rolls and say that that's part of the war on terror. They're going to still have to cough up that information. They cannot hide.
So in filing these, because I'm interested as all can be what you're going to come up with. In filing this takes a lot of time, energy, and money, right? Oh, you tell me. You know what today I did? Today we are hitting. When I say we, Greg Palast is the nose on camera with my fedora, but it's a whole team of people, including lawyers, and we are filing Freedom of Information Act requests on behalf of Rolling Stone and myself, et cetera, on all 29 of these cross-check states to get the list of the people that they've purged, so we can show you. Even though I have lots of the lists myself already, but just dealing with 5 states today took all day. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. It's not easy. But, if we don't do this, democracy is now, it's not free and it's not easy. And I don't know how else to protect the vote except try to make these guys cough up the stuff. And then on top of it, now I have to try to blast stuff out of the FBI, blast stuff out of, mainly the Department of Homeland Security, which Trump is turning Americans into the enemy. Okay, I thought that we were the victims of the war on terror. That we are under attack. He's making it so that Americans we're all suspect. And if you got a Hispanic last name or an Asian American last name, you're on the suspect list. Yeah, but not all Americans, Craig. Just those Democrats. Yeah, well, that's the point. They're so good at this. It's so subtle. Like when I said they sent out a postcard, they don't knock off everyone, because remember I said 3 million people were accused. I've got their list, but only 1 million lost their vote. And the reason is, and it's 7 million names, because they're saying, it's doubles, right? So it's 3.6 million names, and, like John Thomas Jackson, John Edward Jackson, the same guy, right? So that's 7 million names. Only 1 million lost, only 1 million. It was enough to swing key states. They lost 50,000 in Michigan. Trump only lost by won by 10,700 votes. So they proudly told me that they removed like 50,000 voters in Michigan. And I'm sure they're in highly targeted areas, especially those poor areas where Section 8 housing, or you have a lot of HUD programs in a lot of the high renter areas where there's a lot of people moving around. I'm sure they are so good at targeting this that it's all right there. Yeah. See, here's the gimmick. Our statisticians were telling us that you are 900% more likely to return a postcard from the government if you are a white, older suburbanite than if you are a young African American in housing that's moving. And it's mostly not because you don't return postcards. One, it looks like junk mail, you throw it away. But it's one secret of the post office, they don't deliver all the mail, especially in those areas. Second, you've moved to the next building and it says "Do not forward." You've moved. So you've just moved in your congressional district. You're still a legal voter. Yep. But you don't. They have your old address. Yeah, taking a little playbook, taking from the old caging playbook. Yeah,
And that's also, by the way, in the film. And they brought that back. You know, that 2 weeks ago, the consent decree, which has lasted for 30 years, stopping caging. For those who don't know what caging is, it was well explained in the film by Bobby Kennedy. You send letters out to black voters who you know are not at their registration address. They say, well, if they're not their registration address, what are they doing? How about they're in the Army, they're in the military, they're assigned overseas. They are black students during the summer at historically black colleges who don't have to be there in the summer, so they have a forward. And you send them letters, do not forward. When the letters come back as undeliverable because the soldiers overseas, I really know we have the exact cases of these in these instances. Soldiers overseas, you challenge their vote. You say that there's a ghost voter, that there's no voter at that address. Now, if you mail in your ballot from Afghanistan to your home precinct at the Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, Florida, I'm using this because it's a real example that happened, your vote is challenged. You don't know it. And those minority voters lose their vote. That's caging. And it's illegal under the Voting Rights Act when you target voters of color. But it used to be plain just illegal. You can't cage anyone until 2 weeks ago when a consent decree signed by the Republican National Committee, because they were caught 30 years ago, so they agreed for 30 years we won't do this. Now, it should be illegal no matter what, but they're back to their games. I know what they were doing. In the last election, they absolutely did it in North Carolina. They were caught, but nothing happened.
Yeah, and Florida and other places as well. So last question I've got for you, how do we stop this stuff? Well,
number one, if someone's breaking into your house, you need to know it. The alarms have got to go off. That's why I tell people, watch the movie or get the book or something and listen to Rick Smith, stay informed and get the word out. Second, you've got to understand that the mainstream media is not going to give you this story because, Hillary Clinton told us we have the best electoral system and election system in the world. I guess she's only been to Kazakhstan. So, you have to understand that the voting system is under attack, and not by the fraudulent voters that they say, the people, stealing someone's eye, pretending to be someone else, fake ID. It doesn't happen. I mean, it doesn't happen. So what you have to get across the information that they're using this as a cover for real theft by the voting officials themselves, the GOP voting officials, and it's ugly, and we have to raise hell about it and make it a critical issue and require all candidates to step forward and say, I will protect the voters.
It's a good start. It's a good start. And also, see the movie. See the movie. Buy the book. Best democracy money can buy. I've got my copy. I hope everyone it should be right next to the bedstand.
Okay, and the movie's free if you've got Prime. So.
There you go, Greg. I appreciate the time, man.
You got me. Bye. Thanks.
Always fantastic talking to you, Greg Palast. You can check out his website, gregpalast.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Don't believe that God wants me to give my money to someone like you. But I do believe in what a crazy man can do.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1984. That was the day the Nestle Corporation agreed to terms in order to end a 7-year international boycott against the company. The boycott was over the unsafe and dangerous ways that Nestle marketed and sold its baby formula in third world countries. The boycott began in the United States in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It spread abroad to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, eventually reaching 10 countries. The campaign was largely grassroots roots in nature, with local activists organizing different actions. In Massachusetts, boycotters ceremoniously dumped Nestle products in a Boston Nestea party. Finally, after 7 years, the grassroots organizing met its goal. Nestle agreed to follow international standards for baby formula marketing. Boycotts are an important way for consumers and workers to protest corporate practices and social injustice. There have been several very influential boycotts in our nation's history. In the 1950s, the Montgomery bus boycott challenged racial discrimination in one southern city and helped to launch the civil rights movement and empower a generation to fight for equality. In the 1960s, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta of the United Farm Workers called for a boycott of grape and lettuce growers in California. That boycott helped to bring national attention to the fight to improve pay and working conditions for Latino farm workers in California. In the 1980s, a campaign against goods made in South Africa was a stand against that country's apartheid system. In 1984, the members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10 refused to unload a South African ship in the port of Oakland. Their action stood as a powerful statement of international worker solidarity for racial justice. Boycotts have long helped to change the course of history as citizens stand together in solidarity.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
So Mike Pence again, the decider, 49-49 in the U.S. Senate, as Senator Brownback Mountain moves on to be I didn't even really know we had a U.S. ambassador at large for international or religious freedom, but evidently this was created back in 1998. And, who could be a better crazy religious person for this job than Brownback Mountain? There you go. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. And, of course, when I think of religious freedom, I think of Kansas. So I guess it all makes sense.
There you go. Surprised by Sam Brownback leaving Kansas after the mess he created there to go take on religious freedom. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen?
I mean, this seems like a, pretty innocuous issue. Religion generally isn't something that people get, particularly worked up over. So should just be a walk in the park.
Here we go. The next holy wars are on our doorstep. Oh, geez, oh man. The big news of the day, obviously, Donald Trump said he's looking forward to testifying, and not just testifying, but under oath.
Exactly. Yeah, this is something that he told reporters towards the end of the day in a bit of an impromptu gaggle in front of the chief of staff's office, something that a lot of people just weren't really expecting to take place, but now we have that moving forward. So what we know now is that the president is hoping to speak with Mueller, saying that this should happen within the period of 2 to 3 weeks, although, frankly, with Trump, everything is sort of organized in 2-week increments. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will happen in that period of time. And now we actually have him definitively saying this. Previously in a Rose Garden press conference a number of months ago, he said that he would be more than willing to tell Mueller everything that he had said publicly about firing Michael Flynn. Earlier this month, he speculated that there was not going to be a situation in which Mueller was going to want to speak to him, since, as Trump has said many times, there is no collusion. And today, this is a bit of a change in what we've been hearing from so far, after a lot of efforts from many members of the White House press corps to get a definitive answer on this.
So are we expecting tomorrow morning the tweets to come out that he's not going to change the position, and that's not what he really meant to say?
I mean, that would basically be sort of the status quo at this point. What we've been hearing from White House officials is basically the line, we are going to cooperate. We are cooperating on all aspects of this, getting close to that, but not giving any clear-cut answers, much like Trump has given today. And what we know so far, whenever Trump makes a promise, there is a period afterwards in which members of the White House staff will try to rally around and say, that's not exactly what the president meant. meant, and then we'll get a much different answer. That's something that we saw with immigration reform. That's something that we've seen quite a few times in the West Wing so far, in the young Trump presidency. But as it stands right now, we have him publicly saying this. It remains to be seen if this is going to be shifted or is going to change. But a lot of people are taking these words to heart.
Yeah, I'm expecting, like with the DACA deal that he was evidently in favor of, and then someone whispered it in his ear, and no, that we want the opposite, that he flips. I think what he meant to say is there's no way in hell he's looking forward to testifying under oath. Maybe that'll come out tomorrow. The other big news, evidently Donald's not thrilled with the 23 mayors in the sanctuary cities who, I guess, decided we're not coming to your infrastructure talk.
Exactly. The White House was having a talk today about infrastructure, about combating opioids, and invited mayors to attend. And then, following the Justice Department's announcement that they are basically threatening 23 cities with subpoenas, those who are believed to be sanctuary cities, essentially trying to get them to release data to prove whether or not they are complying with federal immigration laws, was seen as an attack on cities as a whole. The U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is currently being led by New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu, released a statement saying that the White House is essentially playing politics with cities, trying to use them as props in order to demonize immigrants, and saying that an attack on one city and one mayor is an attack on all of them, and therefore leading that boycott. As a result, Landrieu did not come to the White House today, and Bill de Blasio, who has been a pretty clear Trump critic, was also the most high-profile member not to show up as well. So this is, of course, coming as the administration is trying to move forward with a new infrastructure plan, something that has historically relied on support from mayors, support from those who are serving in official city capacities, and this certainly threatens that. And considering that this is supposed to be something that the White House has said for quite some time now will be bipartisan, since everybody seems to love infrastructure, this is just yet another needless political fight that is essentially just shooting the administration in the foot.
And of course, the top leader, the president of the United States, says that it's the mayors. The mayors are choosing illegals and criminals and murderers and rapists over law-abiding citizens. And look, it's exactly what you'd expect from him, and he did not fail to deliver.
I mean, he certainly did. He did address some of the mayors who showed up today, and instead of glossing over the issue like we would have seen with most presidents, decided to issue a direct sort of form of saber rattling for those who called for that boycott. Again, not something that's necessarily surprising considering the track record we've seen so far, but nevertheless a pretty clear step away from the norms.
Yeah. So also today, evidently the president came around to the idea that maybe he should say something on what happened in Kentucky.
We had a tweet from the president wishing thoughts and prayers to Kentucky, sort of the fill-in-the-blank script that we've seen at this point from lawmakers on the right. We also had the press secretary noting that he had spoken with Governor Bevin in Kentucky, but then there was, as could be expected, a lot of pushback against any questions presented to the White House over whether or not the administration is going to be seeking anything different this time around, or is going to be pursuing any items that could perhaps roll back gun violence, could roll back mass shootings. And instead, we just got a basic boilerplate reply saying, well, the administration has done a lot to lower crime. They've done a lot to combat illegal immigration. But, glossing over the big issue on the table right now, which is that this was the 11th school shooting this year, particularly frightening considering that we are only on the 24th of the month, and just the latest mass shooting to take place under this administration's watch. So
exactly how does the immigration thing come into this? I'm confused. Was the kid who did the shooting, was he an illegal? Did he sneak in across the border? I'm not getting how the two come together.
I mean, I think the message from the administration is basically crime is down, even if violent shooting deaths and mass scenarios aren't, which is a pretty strange argument to be coming out from them. And then on top of that, we also had an op-ed coming out from Jeff Sessions today declaring that the president's pledge to end American carnage has been upheld. something that doesn't necessarily seem to make sense in light of what we've seen yesterday and that tragic incident in Kentucky and the one before that in Italy, Texas. But nevertheless, that is the message that the administration is pursuing, that we are safer now under that watch, despite the fact that these things continue to happen.
Yeah, but hasn't crime been going down for in the last couple of decades? I mean, I don't know that he can take much credit for. I'm not. I know the MO. I know you take credit for stuff you didn't actually do. I get that. So I'm struggling with it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that the president has spoken a lot about, especially in the campaign trail. He's painted a much more grim depiction of America than what actually matches up in terms of the level of crime we have. And so when you're building up all of these sort of spooky boogeymen, it's sort of, I guess, within their interest to pretend that they were the ones who fought them off, even if they may not have existed in the first place. So I don't know.
Interesting. I guess Sarah Sanders said today, I guess nobody cares about the president asking McCabe if he voted for anyone.
Yeah, something that came out yesterday reports of, apparently after Comey was fired, the president met with Andrew McCabe, who was the acting FBI director at the time, and reportedly specifically asked him who he had voted for in the 2016 election. McCabe said that he had not, in fact, voted, but nevertheless was pretty clearly, disturbed by that question coming up between a president who had just fired, a FBI director over some very questionable grounds. And so that was one of the big stories from today, but not according to the White House. Sarah Sanders pushed back against that, saying that she did not speak to the president about it. And then when a reporter pointed out that this is one of the big stories of the day, how could you have not spoken to the president about this? Her reply was that this is not a major story for most Americans, saying that she would be happy to conduct a poll that would frankly show that. And nevertheless, just kind of forgetting the fact that having a sitting president asking an FBI director about their personal politics, whether or not that's appealing to your base, that is nevertheless a very important story when it comes to the much larger issues facing this administration and facing the country.
So if she's willing to do it, did anyone say, okay, go ahead?
I don't think that came up, but I'm sure there will probably be some polling agency who will try to get to the bottom of this and try to get some interest. As it stands right now, this is a line that the administration is continually trying to claim, largely that the Russian investigation just isn't being paid attention to. But nevertheless, if you look at some of the, I guess just basic, not to be too Trumpian about this, but if you look at the ratings, networks generally who have focused on the Russian investigation and have focused on these big, questionable issues facing the administration have been enjoying a lot more coverage than those who have glossed over it. And that just seems to be a fact of the matter right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the average person, whether you've staked a political stake in the ground, you want to know if your president was colluding with the Russians. I mean, come on. I mean, my entire lifetime, they have been an adversary. The fact that, and look, from what I'm told from, political scholars and all of that it wouldn't be illegal for there to be some coordination. I still don't like it. I think the average American would go, no, I don't think I like it.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, right?
Yeah, well, we'll see when this goes down. Last question I've got for you. Evidently on Monday's the big day, the immigration policy from the White House is coming down. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, the White House announced today that they are going to be releasing an immigration framework on Monday. This is going to lay out what exactly the White House is looking for when it comes to legislation to take on DACA and find a permanent solution to that. What we know right now is that the White House has repeatedly said that, DACA alone can't be addressed. It also needs to focus on border security, funding the wall and whatnot. And in this situation, the smart money is on that there will be a memo laying out these four principles yet again, but also bogged down with a lot of additional, goals that the White House is trying to reach on the immigration front.
Right.
Things that may not necessarily seem like border security or, reasonable steps, but will nevertheless be touted by the White House as a necessity in order to move on with anything related to DACA. So, as you know, we only have until February 8th before the government runs out of funding. Democrats have bought into McConnell's promise to bring, DACA up for conversation. And as it stands right now, it looks like we could be facing yet another fight with no clear exit in sight.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, are you predicting another shutdown? Because I am.
Yeah, I am.
There you go. All right. So we're on the same page. Justin, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff, Justin Duckham, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Time to talk.
Another fight with no clear exit in sight.
Now, I was going to ask you, are you predicting another shutdown? Because I am.
Yeah, I am.
There you go. All right. So we're on the same page.
Smith Show.
Yeah, this one's for the workers who toil night and day, by hand and by brain.
There's some good news coming out of Lansing, Michigan. After 7 days of hearing more than 150 women tell their stories about the abuse that Dr. Lawrence G. Nasser did, the judge finally came out with a sentence. And she was very, very, very forthright, very to the point. She said it was her honor to sentence him and that she signed his death warrant. He is sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison for sexual abuse and all of just a litany of charges. He's also, this is on top of the 60 years that he's already been sentenced to for a couple of charges. I guess it was seven charges from 7 girls back in November. So tack that 60 years on to the minimum of 40. It's a good 100 years. I don't think he's going to make it, no matter what good a shape he's in. Now, the thing that gets me about this whole scenario and listening to these stories, absolutely just heartbreaking. You're talking about, what I think it was more than 160 who claimed that this guy sexually abused them while they were supposedly in his care. And you had the U.S. gymnastics system not protecting them at all. In fact, there had been investigations. There had been people who had complained, and their words went unheard. And in fact, one of the women that I was watching her testimony said, immediately she told her parents called the police, and the police, came and said, it's a medical procedure, and he was able to get away with it. It's just, well, she's too young. She doesn't understand, and you go, wow. I mean, just listening to some of these stories, and as a parent, you listen to this stuff and you go, another reason why I don't let my kids, as a parent, how do you go, here, go, we're going to put you in the control of these other people, especially young girls. I don't know, but fortunately, he will never do it again. He promises. And I'm sure he's going to be very popular in prison. But 100 to 100, well, 100 to, 235 years? Out, maybe in, 80 with good behavior. I don't think he's going to make it. And good. And look, I think everyone all along should be going too. Not just a little window dressing. I understand the president of Michigan State University, where this guy was a professor, had worked for decades. Evidently, he stepped down as well. Not enough. Not enough. Horrible. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. If you're listening on a station that just picks up the first hour, head on over to thericksmithshow.com to pick up hour 2. For the rest of you, stick around. We're right back with Sarah Burris from Raw Story. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need. Because he's racing and pacing and plotting the course. He's fighting.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. My tweet of the day, and you just gotta love the Trumpkin. The Associated Press tweeted out that breaking, Trump says immigration plan will let protections for younger immigrants morph into citizenship in 10 to 12 years. I look at the people who were protected under DACA. I would argue that they're already on that path to citizenship. They've been educated in our schools. They've been here. Most of them, it's the only home they've ever known. And, I don't know that the morphing into, I don't know, Power Rangers, maybe that's what he was watching during executive time. An old episode of Power Rangers. That's where he got the word morph. That's all I can think of. Anyway, here to talk about this and, well, all of the other insanity. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. She's a reporter over at Raw Story. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what do you think? What, 10, 12 years, they'll morph into the rest of us?
It's so surprising that the way that he views the Dreamers is an us versus them thing. I mean, these are young people who, for the most part, know no other country other than the United States. So this idea that they're going to morph into something to begin with is completely absurd.
Now, do you think it's, in his defense, do you think it could be, when I was a kid, it was the melting pot idea. People from all over the world came here and we all became Americans. There's a big, giant melting pot. Do you think this is some perverted way of saying that?
I don't know, maybe. But even that, again, there's no melting here. They know this country better than anybody else. I mean, they are, for the most part, Americans. It's just paperwork.
Yeah. Also this week, we saw, and I wanted to get your thoughts on, because my wife wouldn't work for her. Evidently, Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council, a really right-wing, crazy religious zealot, evidently, according to him, the whole Stormy Daniels thing, the whole grab her by the you-know-what thing, the whole, all the sexual abuse, all the perversion, all of that stuff, mulligans, all mulligans. No, we're forgiven.
Here's the thing about the far right. These are people who have based their entire profession on the idea that they know better morals than anybody else. So for them to come out and say that after 70 years of bad behavior, of affairs, of abuse, alleged abuse, of several divorces and being a really crappy father, right? After all of this, Trump is somehow now the paragon of family values. I mean, it's not only absurd, but at the very least, I'm sort of relieved because now it's they're out of the closet as being, BS lobbyists that we always knew that they were.
That's interesting you bring up out of the closet, and yet they won't forgive anyone who does.
Exactly. I mean, these are people who've tried to stand on this moral high ground and clearly were happy to cede it to Donald Trump. all for the price tag of a conservative judge. So, you know, I like this idea of thinking about, you know, Jesus Christ would forgive Donald Trump for all of his sins and hopefully would say, you know, learn from your mistakes and become a better person. That's not what the far right has spent the last, 20, 30 years trying to say about every other person in the world.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, you know, they're gonna follow Jesus whenever it comes to Donald Trump. Please.
No, look, I'm of the mindset that, you know, you do forgive, and there's all of that you're supposed to, and I'm hoping that, you know, my past sins will be forgiven. But there's also that part, and maybe it's just my Catholic upbringing, that you don't keep doing it. That you made a mistake, you make your amends, and then you don't do it again.
Exactly. They have words for that. They're called, you know, complete and total schmucks who don't really believe in anything and just want to use a get out of jail free card. I mean, that's sort of what Donald Trump is trying to do here, is he's like, oh, I'll just give them whatever they want, and somehow that's going to be my ticket into, you know, whatever afterlife. Actually, I don't even think that he cares about the afterlife. I think he sort of sees himself already as a god, and probably will rule his own paradise.
It'll all be gold.
Right, everything will be gold.
That gaudy 1970s kind of looking gold. No, but here's the thing. I mean, you know, you look at this, and I had this conversation the other day, you know, with somebody who has told me repeatedly that they're a God-fearing Christian conservative, and I go, do you really not have a problem with a guy who's going to pay a porn star $130 to shut up? You do not have a problem with that? And he was like, no. And I'm going, how is it possible? Especially given the fact that, you know, Melania had just had a baby, and there was no problem whatsoever. He goes, no. And his rationale was, we're going to stop those baby killing liberals because we've got the Supreme Court, and all else is forgiven.
It's so ridiculous. And I think this is, again, the problem with the far right, with the religious conservatives, is they just don't get it. These are people who have, for the longest time, they don't care about stopping abortion. They just want to make it illegal. I think people who actually do oppose abortion for moral reasons want to try and prevent it. And so they work toward helping women, having health care, taking care of children, like all of the things that you're supposed to do that I would assume that a church would support. And yet, you know, these people don't care about these issues. They say that they do, but that's all lies. Yeah. And I think now the chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah, I also loved his explanation that evangelical Christians were quote, tired of being kicked around by Barack Obama and his leftists. And I think they're finally glad that there's somebody on the playground who's willing to punch the bully. And I'm going, really good Christian language.
I mean, here's this guy who is like the paragon of family values, right? Like, he married the woman of his dreams. He never cheated on her, as far as we know. He's, you know, a dedicated father who's always there. As president of the United States, he coached his daughter's basketball team. I mean, come on. Like, this guy is family values, and you're trading him in for the cheater, the liar, and the bribery guy. Come on.
It's all a lie. It's all a lie, Sarah. Don't believe it. And Michelle's really Michael.
Right.
I mean, come on, that's how ludicrous this stuff gets.
It's so absurd. I mean, this is like the conspiracy theory that even the X-Files wouldn't touch.
No, not even out of this world. Not even that.
No, not even the X-Files. Like, that's too unbelievable for even them.
And the thing is, you know, there's part of me that goes, you know, what happened to us as a society? You know, the tinfoil hat people have always been among us. We just never let them anywhere near, you know, the mainstream. You go, okay, you know, have your AM talk radio show at 4 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, peddle your conspiracies and all of that. And, you know, we just kind of left them off to the side. You know, good on you. Little pat on the head. Now they seem to be running things.
Yeah, like the tinfoil hat people used to be the old men at the diner, you know, just talking to each other over a cup of coffee. Now they're in the U.S. Senate, or worse, they're the head of the National Security Agency, and basically instructing Trump to sign executive orders putting them in power. I mean, that's kind of terrifying. And they're creating all of these conspiracy theories that, again, like this is the kind of stuff that you would see in fiction, but isn't reality. Like there's no deep state. There's no conspiracy theory. Like I was watching the actual X-Files because they've done the reboot. And even the X-Files is talking about how Trump wants to shut down the FBI and how ridiculous that is. Like they were making birther jokes tonight. I mean, that's just absurd. Like when the actual conspiracy theorist, when the guy who sees the aliens is calling you crazy, like you got to check yourself.
That's a good point. And now, yesterday, the big story for me was Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, said that, the secret society at the FBI and the Justice Department, they were trying to undermine the Trump administration. Now, of course, today he's kind of walked that back, admitting that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But, it's that kind of, we're just going to spew stuff without thinking that someone's going to ask the question of, what are you talking about? You've got a U.S. senator claiming that the FBI has a secret society, and you go, again, like you pointed out, the tinfoil hat guy is sitting in the U.S. Senate.
To be fair, Ron Johnson has never really known what he was talking about, but I mean, this is so far outside of the norm that, I mean, just think about it in terms of Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is typically the right one.
Right.
People at the FBI don't make enough money to begin with to create the shadow conspiracy in these secret societies. Like, if they really wanted to do something crazy that would undermine the government, they'd go work for a defense contractor probably. But the FBI is not the place to do it because you're probably not going to make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think we've been watching too many movies.
Yeah, I mean, these are people who would prefer to have a reality that, of their own choosing. And it helps them politically that way. Yeah,
because you get the dim among us to go, yeah, I saw that on TV.
Exactly.
It's possible.
And it's like people see it and then they see cable news and then they, and they think, oh, well, it's pretty similar, Yeah,
it's all reality. But here's the thing. The one thing that Johnson did come out with today, explaining that he didn't know what he was talking about, is that he's going to be focused again. I'll let you guess. What do you think he wants the U.S. Senate to focus on in hearings coming forward?
Oh my gosh, I didn't even see this yet. So you're totally blowing me away. Is it? I'm going to say he's probably wanting to focus on Hillary Clinton.
Well, there's a surprise. Back to the damn emails.
Benghazi? We're going to go back to Benghazi now? I
mean, are we ever going to get over the emails? You think that ever goes away? Do you think in 50 years they're going to be still going? But Hillary's emails.
It's this joke now on staff, and honestly, I see it as a joke on Twitter all the time. It's like all of these things that are happening in our country. Things that we don't even notice because the news cycle has gone crazy, swung towards some insane tweet that Trump said, and it'll be weeks later that we see a story where we're like, oh my God, we didn't even write about this. When did this happen? And now we just started, it's like we just copy and paste, Hillary's emails. It's become this joke that all of these things are being missed. All of these things are allowed to happen in the country now because, we got to focus on Hillary's emails.
Well, we basically have destroyed a good portion of the country because of those damn emails, because we've got the Marmalade Mussolini sitting in the White House.
Yeah, and that's the sad part is, I was talking to somebody, actually it was on Quora. There are all of these questions that Quora asks you to answer, and occasionally I'll get on there and say something. And there was a conservative guy who was like, why are we liberals crying on election day? And I just said, I wasn't one of the people that was crying, but I recognize that when somebody like Trump gets elected, people are going to get hurt. There are people, even his own supporters, are going to end up in a really bad situation and they're going to get hurt. And if you have any kind of empathy, then you understand that that's not a good place for the country to be in.
It's just mind blowing. And here we are, the 1 year anniversary. We have a government shutdown.
Yeah, and 3 weeks later, I mean, obviously, what Trump has said tonight about the about DACA and whether or not he's going to approve of DACA, and I know that there's going to be this battle again with the funding for the wall because Chuck Schumer's like, no, we're not funding the wall. The government might shut down again in 3 weeks.
So do you think the shutdown was a bad idea? Do you think it was strategically a bad idea?
No. Okay, I have a weird theory about this. First of all, the thing about the shutdowns is if they keep happening over the next 3 weeks, we're getting closer and closer to the election, right? At some point, you know, Americans aren't stupid. They're just treated like they're stupid, right? Like people are going to realize if these keep happening over and over again and Republicans hold every branch of government, then maybe it's the Republicans' fault. No matter what Republicans want to try and say, you know, that it's all Democrats' fault. Democrats aren't in power.
Right.
And, you know, there's a possibility that Democrats can screw all of this up. But at the same time, you've got this entire party that actually opposes funding the government to begin with, right? Like that is a pillar of their party and a pillar of who they are. Is they want to shut down Medicaid. They want to shut down Social Security. They want to get rid of all of this funding for all of these things. So a shutdown for the government, I kind of feel like this is sort of that moment of tough love where it's like, okay, you people were holding up these signs saying, you know, get the government out of my Medicare. Well, guess what? All of that's going to get shut down. And you're the ones who wanted it to happen. So here you go. Tell me what that's like for you. Tell me what you want for that.
You know, I talked to some of those people and you know, they don't think it's going to happen to them. Now I've got another take on it. I think it was a bad idea this past weekend to shut it down because you buried the lead. You had the Women's March. You could have dominated the news cycle for the entire weekend. The 1 year anniversary of Trump being inaugurated could have been all about, you know, how bad he's been. Could have been about, you know, hundreds of thousands of women across the country marching in the streets, and yet all it was about was the shutdown, and how all I saw in the mainstream media was Democrats shut down the government while Republicans didn't even get the 50 votes that they would have needed to enact the nuclear option that Trump wants.
That's the thing that really bothers me about the Democratic Party is you just got to be like, guys, you've been in power for, you know, how many years? Chuck Schumer's been in the Senate forever. And why is he so bad at this? You know, like, where the hell are the staffers being like, I have another idea, right? I have some kind of better talking point. Where are those people? And why aren't
Republicans?
Exactly.
Because they're paying. Look, I mean, you look at the money that's gone into our political system. The money is decidedly on the other side. If you want to get, I cannot tell you how many people have told me, Rick, you could do that. You do this really well. You could be fairly rich. All you got to do is just flip that message and go on over where the money is. Go to the other side. Go to the dark side.
It's true. I mean, I make jokes about it all the time where it's just like, God, I could be making so much more money if I was.
And all you'd have to do is sell your soul.
I know, right? And I have too many ethics and morals and all of that. I couldn't live with myself.
It's mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing. Last question. Last thing I want to get to. The testifying. Do you really think Trump is looking forward to testifying under oath? Or tomorrow morning will we find a tweet saying, well, that's not what I meant. What I really meant is no way in hell I want to testify.
Oh, hell no, he's not going to testify. He might say one thing, but I can promise you the off-the-record deals that are being made, and, you know, it'll be just like one excuse after another for why he can't testify. His lawyers are going to pull out all of the stops. He might think, I mean, I don't know how stupid he really is. Maybe he honestly thinks that there's nothing to hide and that he could go and testify, but there's no way that his lawyers are going to let him do it.
So you're saying no way he's going to do it?
I think no way. I wish he would do it, and
Me
I wish
too.
it would be public.
I wish it'd be pay-per-view. We could solve our national debt
Totally.
problems.
Oh my God, right?
That'd be great. I'm looking forward to it. But Sarah, I appreciate the time. Look forward to having you get back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm back in the United States after vacation. So
Yeah, if I were you, I wouldn't have come back.
I know the sun was so beautiful.
I saw the pictures. Good for you. You need that every once in a while.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Good stuff. Sarah Burris, reporter over at Raw Story. You can check out some of her work. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Fantastic stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Working people come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1874. That was the day Arturo Alfonso Schomburg was born. Schomburg was an important figure in the Harlem Renaissance. He is also considered a premier historian and collector of material on black life in America. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, he arrived in the United States in 1891 and soon settled into the Cuban and Puerto Rican working class neighborhoods of New York City. Schomburg initially involved himself in the Cuban and Puerto Rican independence movements. When he traveled to New Orleans, he experienced Jim Crow discrimination and witnessed black disenfranchisement firsthand. He reacted strongly to the increased racial tensions, lynchings, and race riots of the period, and believed that history must restore what slavery took away. In 1911, Schomburg and his friend John Edward Bruce founded the Negro Society for Historical Research and established lasting friendships with intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois. He worked for the inclusion of black history into the educational system and continued to amass a wide collection of literature, art, books, pamphlets, and manuscripts on black life and history. His collection spanned materials from across the globe. It included letters of Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, poetry by Phyllis Wheatley, artifacts from Frederick Douglass, and other black leaders. Schomburg's private collection became the basis for the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library's Division of Negro Literature, History, and Prints, which opened in 1925. The division served as a pivotal resource for Harlem Renaissance writers, poets, and artists. Known today as the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, it is recognized as the leading repository for materials and artifacts on black cultural life. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, a new Hart Research Associate poll conducted for the Alliance for Justice. They found that 61% of the people that they polled believe that Donald Trump is likely to appoint federal judges who will, quote, favor the wealthy and powerful over everyday people. And when I saw this, I'm going, 61%? That's all? Really? And because I think pretty much what we've seen out of this administration so far is everything you can possibly do for the wealthy and powerful, they're going to do. Look at the tax heist. Look at the tax heist. It is that simple. But one of the questions they ask is, how much confidence do you have in Donald Trump when it comes to nominating good federal and Supreme Court justices? Just 21% had a great deal of confidence. 20% had a fair amount of confidence. 13, just some. 46%, very little. You would mark me in the, quote, very little. In fact, if there was a fifth category under that, mark me down there. How about the no confidence whatsoever, not even possible category? Put me into that. Because look, I look at someone like Neil Gorsuch. Sorry, this guy was groomed from day one to be the crazy corporate justice that we know he's going to be. Understand, we know he's going to be horrible. And look, this summer, we're going to see it. We're going to see it play out right in front of us as, you know, I've been talking about this Janus versus AFSCME case, which is just going to throw the labor movement on its head. And it's going to, you know, again, give the upper hand to big business. And it's going to, the assault on the labor movement is going to ramp up this summer and into the next year. We already know it. And what does that mean for average everyday workers? Well, it means stagnant wages. It means horrible benefits. It means goodbye retirement security. It means basically you're going to work to your death. Because I would argue right now we're at a time where the idea of retiring is going to be gone. The thought that we're going to work till we die is coming back. Now, it used to be that way. Understand? I mean, in past, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you worked till the day you died or until you couldn't walk anymore. And then we put you in debtor's prison or, some poorhouse or something, warehoused you like cattle. That's where we were. And for a brief period of time after World War II, we had a movement in this country that said you should be able to retire with some dignity. And we pursued those policies. And it worked really well. I look at my grandparents. They retired at a reasonable age while they could still enjoy a little bit of their life. And they, all the way through their retirement, didn't live in poverty, didn't want for anything. They lived in their home. They had disposable income. They, for all intent and purposes, retired with a little bit of dignity and security. And that's what I want for everybody. Yet what we see coming out of the Republicans is just, and I know, Rick, you're always pointing at the Republicans. It just is what it is. Every one of these bad ideas seems to emanate from the conservative movement. And, it just seems to be that all of these horrible ideas come from these think tanks. And at some point we have to be, anytime one of these conservative think tanks come out, we should be remembering the horrible idea and then saying, no way in hell are we ever doing it. To me, it's just that simple. Now, Rich Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, today gave what is being described as a searing critique of the Trump administration. Trumka said broken promises are bad enough, but President Trump has also hurt his office, has used his office to actively hurt working people. He has joined with the corporations and their political allies to undermine the right of workers to bargain collectively. He has taken money out of their pockets and made our workplaces less safe. Trump goes on to say he has divided our country, abandoned our values, and given cover to racism and other forms of bigotry. And they point out that among union members, just 37% approve of President Trump's behavior and the direction he's taken the country. 63% disapprove. And again, I can't believe it's that high. It's one of these things where who are these 37%? And look, what happens come June when the Janus case is all the way through? And it becomes much harder to negotiate those contracts. It becomes much harder to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. And you start seeing the spiraling down. Where do those 37% go then? I mean, that's the part that's just mind-blowing to me. And yet, here we are in one of these moments where you've got, and again, I keep coming back to this, to what's going on. The fact that they're packing the courts with these corporate justices, the fact that they're doing all of these things, and our mainstream media, what are they focused on? The latest shiny thing. Hey, look over here. How do you pull that back? Well, I would argue by tuning in right here. It's to me just that simple. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, John Neurohr is going to be here from the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center to talk about the rollout today of Pennsylvania's promise. Look, we've been defunding higher education. What am I talking about? We've been defunding education as a whole in this country for decades. The time is now to say, you know what? We need to reinvest in the future of this country, and not just in inner cities, but in rural areas as well. Look, Pennsylvania, as I just found out, evidently we're way down the list on the percentage of college graduates. You go back to why people come to places to bring jobs, how job creators work. They look for an educated workforce. And if we're not there, do you think they're coming? And I would argue, thanks to our legislature, we will be the Alabama of the Northeast if things keep up. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the promise and what we need to be doing on the higher education front. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
September, the giant retail monopolist Amazon announced its intention to build a second corporate headquarters in someplace North America. Where's that? Aha! That's the trick in a corporate game called Fleece the Taxpayer. CEO Jeff Bezos demanded that every place submit a list of incentives they would pay to get Amazon to put what he calls HQ2 in their place. Yes, the haughty Amazonian royals actually commanded our public officials to bring all the jewels, gold, and other taxpayer booty they have and kiss Bezos's ring just to be considered for HQ2. In one stroke, taxpayers all across America were pitted against each other in a bidding war. Amazon even listed specific incentives that each supplicant should offer. First was a business-friendly environment. Then, urging hopefuls to think big when offering freebies, the directive demanded contributions of, quote, land, site preparation, tax exemptions, relocation grants, workforce grants, utility grants, and fee reductions. Surely, no self-respecting civic official would willingly play the sucker in such a demeaning sell-out-the-public scam. Officials from 238 cities, regions, and states have so far rushed to Bezos's corporate castle to woo and grovel in the perverse hope that Amazon might choose their taxpayers to rip off. This is Jim Hightower saying Amazon has announced that it has narrowed the actual contenders to 20 cities, so they will now be compelled to jack up their bribe offers. That's the whole purpose of the HQ2 game that this corporate huckster has been running on us. In fact, Amazon's site location team had decided from the start which half-dozen or so cities would be most profitable for the giant. The whole thing is a scamazon, snookering cities into a rigged game only Amazon can win.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. The Rick Smith Show.
So today in Harrisburg, you had higher education advocates, you had students, you had researchers, you had a whole bunch of people at the Capitol, groups like the Association of State Colleges, college and university faculty, the Keystone Research Center, and, of course, members of the Pennsylvania House and Senate gathering to demand that we invest in higher education. And something we've been talking about for a very long time, the idea that we invest in the future. Seems like a good idea. Maybe we should try it. And what they rolled out was Pennsylvania Promise, this idea that we're going to help people get college education. And here to talk a little bit about it, I've asked John Newrohr. He's the communications director over at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So walk me through this. What is the Pennsylvania Promise?
Sure. Well, so first and foremost, because we did have this press conference in Harrisburg, we got fantastic media attention for it. And we had a number of legislators that were there with us. But it is yet to be turned into legislative language. So that is a conversation that's happening right now. But we put the report out. Here are the basics. So the idea is that we would cover 4 years of tuition and fees to Pennsylvania state system of higher education schools for students who come from families that make less than $110,000 a year. We would cover 2 years of public community college for any student, any recent high school graduate. We would have 4 years of grants for students depending on what their family income is to the state-related universities, so Pitt, Penn State, Temple, and Lincoln University. And then we would also have grants for adults who do not have a college degree for post-secondary education at any of those kinds of schools. So the state-related, the PASSHE schools, the state system of higher education schools, public community colleges, and also then, importantly, apprenticeship programs, state-approved apprenticeship programs. And then There's a little bit more sort of when you get down into the weeds. So there are also what we are calling mobility grants. So students from lower income families, I believe the number is less than $48,000 a year. Those students would be eligible for additional annual grants to help cover other fees associated with being a college student.
Right, books and all kinds of stuff.
Exactly. So it is not free college. There are, other costs, like I just said, associated with being a student. But it takes a significant chunk out of the cost of being a student at one of the public or state-related universities here in Pennsylvania. And as you alluded to before, access to higher education here in Pennsylvania, even for those public universities and colleges, is difficult for working families in a lot of ways. Pennsylvania, there was a U.S. News and World Report ranking for higher education. There are a number of different factors involved with this ranking, including cost, the kind of debt that students come out of school with in a given state, how much states are actually investing in higher education, and Pennsylvania was dead last. So it's a huge problem, and but I want to emphasize it's not just about students going to those four-year colleges and universities. It's also about community colleges and access to community college. It's about adults who don't have a college degree being able to go and get some kind of post-secondary education. So there's a lot involved, and it is ambitious, that's for sure. But I think, like we've always said when we talk about budgeting and how we appropriate funds, that is really the budget is a moral document in so many ways, and we think that this is something that we should and do value as a state, and we think that the legislature, our elected officials, should value it more as well.
I'm with you, but here's the thing, and this is one of the things I keep talking about. I'm sure you've seen the report, as a lot of people have. A couple of years ago, they came out with a report that said automation is going to basically destroy half of the jobs we do today, which means there's going to be the need for a lot of job training and a lot of upgrading of skills. And, for people who, people like me who may, I drove a truck for a living. They say in 15 years, there'll be no more long haul truck driving jobs. So what are you going to do with people like me who are, 50 years old, have, been driving all these years? What's the next career? What's the opportunity to be able to get an education? And can you afford it? It seems like now's the time to lay that groundwork to say, okay, when this job goes away, there's a pathway to move into the next one.
No question. I think that it is natural for the main takeaway for the press that covered our event to be about the four-year colleges and universities, the PASHE schools, and basically free tuition for students of under a certain family income. That's the main takeaway, and I understand that. But that's why I wanted to reemphasize how important it is for the component of this for us to talk about, and sometimes, I think lead with the component of this, which is about adult learners. It's about folks going back and using the grants that would be available for state-approved apprenticeship programs. It's the kinds of skills that are available at one of those 14 public community colleges all over the state. If you actually go and you look at the course catalogs at those community colleges, those kinds of skills that you're talking about, those are available in particular at those public community colleges. So that's a really, really important component of the plan. And I think you're absolutely right. That is an option that we can't go without.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I mean, even if you're talking about the 14 state-run colleges and universities or the community colleges, there's got to be a way that it's somewhat affordable. And I tell this story often, John. I have a friend who she went through law school at the University of Michigan. She went through undergraduate and law school, working a minimum wage job, lived on her own in an apartment, had a car, lived a very, meager life, but graduated with no debt. Now, granted, this is back in the 1960s, but she graduated with no debt. Today, that's impossible. And I look at, I guess the statistic I saw is, here in Pennsylvania, 70% of students who graduate end up saddled with, just years of debt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that we keep coming back to is really, it's a question of values. It's a question of what we value as a state. The price tag on the plan is $1 billion a year, and we understand that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. On the other hand, when you think about the fact that our budget on an annual basis is $37 billion and going up, and that we outline some specific ideas for paying for this program, it is not at all beyond reasonable for our legislators to come to the table in a bipartisan fashion and turn a plan like this into legislation. So some examples of the ways that we could pay for this: a severance tax on natural gas drilling that would be equivalent to what they have in West Virginia. In a couple of years, would be able to sustain this program on an annual basis. We put forward the idea of last year the fair share tax, which is basically a tax on income from wealth, passive income. So not on wages and not on interest even. What we're talking about is a tax on capital gains, a tax on profit from rental properties, things like that. If you you can pay for that easily with a very small tax on income from wealth. There are a number of other options that we outline in the plan. A 1% increase in the personal income tax would bring in 4 times as much money as we would need on an annual basis to have this program as we laid out in the plan. So it's possible, and I think what we want to do is we want to find legislators who will champion this. We had a great group of legislators at the Capitol for the press conference. We had Senator Vincent Hughes. We had Representative Roebuck, who is the minority chair of the House Education Committee, a great ally. We had Representative Harris from the Philadelphia area, who himself is a graduate of one of the Apache schools of Millersville and is on the board there at Millersville University, another great champion for this. So we're going to continue to have those conversations with legislators, and we really look forward to having conversations with Republicans. And there are many Republicans in the legislature who are champions or like to call themselves champions of the state system schools and the state-related as well. This is an opportunity to literally put your money, well, not literally put your money where your mouth is, but to put your money where your mouth is.
There you go. No, I mean, at the end of it, and it's a way to shore up our state universities, which I argue are, the system is a gem that we need to maintain. But what do you say, John, to the person who goes, you know what, I went to college and I paid my own way, and I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and you're just giving this away to these kids?
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple arguments there. One, back to your story about your friend who went to the University of Michigan Law School years ago. The cost of college has been rising exponentially. So the story about when they were younger and they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, and yeah, sure, when even adjusted for inflation, I bet you tuition and fees were a quarter of what they are now. So that's one thing. And another thing is, the global economy is changing. Our national economy is changing. Whereas a few decades ago, jobs that were available to folks with just a high school degree, for better or for worse, and this gets into a much longer conversation about the way our economy works, about the way that we value experience versus education. The truth of the matter is, those jobs that you could get with a high school diploma before, you need a college degree. That's just a fact. And so I think what we had a student that was from Shippensburg University at this press conference, an incredibly inspiring young man, a sophomore at Shippensburg University. He spoke, and he comes from a poor family in Reading. His his mother was unable to afford to go to college. He's incredibly bright, incredibly sharp and committed. Got into Shippensburg University, and he said to me, you know, I shouldn't have to wake up every day and be upset about the fact that I am here in college and it's costing us so much money. I should be proud to be the first person in my family to go to college. And I also, you know, we shouldn't be saddling my family with this massive debt. This should be something we're celebrating. And, you know, he said, I'm a sophomore. I'm $30,000 in debt right now in the middle of my sophomore year. And that's just going to get worse. And that's not how, you know, it should be. And families shouldn't have to make decisions like that for their kids who want to go to college. We should make that accessible to those kids that want to work hard and better themselves. And, you know, it's great for him to come and speak at this press conference and recognize that he wants to sort of make sure that kids that come after him don't have to worry about that every day that they wake up, to be upset that they're in college and doing what they want to do and following their dreams.
It's another one of those horrible stories. And look, you know, the reality is that tale, that story, replicated too many times in this state and in this country. And at some point, the hope is that this kind of legislation moves through, that we take this on. But what do you also say to the person that, you know, is going to try and pit the rural against the urban areas? Because, you know, you said, you know, Philadelphia, and, you know, you get some people going, wow, this is all just going to benefit, you know, those people. You know, to me, this should be, everybody in the state should be able to go as far as their abilities are able to take them. And not because, you know, this is where I'm struggling with where higher education has gone. It seems like you can go to any school you want if you can pay for it. And sadly, more of us are unable to pay for it.
Sure. I think that is not untrue on one hand. But to your original question about sort of the rural versus the urban, look at where some of these Pennsylvania state system of higher education schools are. I mean, there's no question that some of our rural areas are what we call education deserts. And that is a different problem, and it's a problem we should also be addressing, where you have parts of the state where there aren't nearby public community colleges, for example, and the state system schools are not necessarily close by. But think about some of the state schools and where they're located. Think about a school like Edinburgh University. Think about a school like Mansfield University.
Like Bloomsburg.
Yeah, in more rural areas of the state. And you know, this plan that we put out is the culmination of a series of reports that we did on higher education. And a couple of those reports pointed specifically to the fact that the Pennsylvania state system of higher education schools, most specifically, do a better job of helping students attain that upward economic mobility that really is the sort of the goal of going to college, or at least the primary function of wanting to go and get a post-secondary degree, is that upward economic mobility. Yeah. And the research shows that the state system schools, and this is true of community colleges too, but in particular, state system schools, those 14 schools across the state, many in rural areas of the state, do a better job than private nonprofit, private for-profit, even the state-related universities of boosting economic mobility, taking students that come from families that, the way that we did our research, are in the lower 40% of the income scale, and boosting them up to the top 40% of the income scale. And that might not seem like a lot, but that is significant. That is a game changer for students, and then as they grow their families, it's a game changer. So, you know, I think, yes, there is an issue with education deserts in some parts of the state, but also we do have great public community colleges and PASHE schools that are servicing many rural areas of the state. And so we want to make sure that the students that live in those areas that want to go to those schools don't have to make these decisions about whether or not they can afford to do it. if they're smart enough, if they're dedicated enough, and they're ready to work, they should be able to go.
It seems simple to me. So the last question I've got, how do we make this a reality?
Well, that's a good question. So like I said, we're working on turning this into legislative language, so we hope soon to have a bill that we can talk more specifically about. But the other thing that we're doing, and we'll keep you abreast of this as we plan it, is we're going to take this on tour. So we're going to go to a number of the state system schools across the state and the community colleges, the public community colleges. We're going to hold events there on campus with students, with faculty, with members of the community, and we're going to talk about how important this is for students and for future students and for the health and well-being of the state system schools and those public community colleges, because you're absolutely right. Another problem right now is falling enrollment at those schools. And so this another benefit of a program like this is that we can help to stem the tide of that falling enrollment and strengthen those schools that have done so much for so many people and bringing economic mobility, upward economic mobility to Pennsylvania families.
There you go, John. I look forward to that. I look forward to you coming back and telling us what's going on and keeping us up to date.
Sounds good. Always good to talk to you, Rick. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our friend John Newar, Communications Director there at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. We'll get some information on how you can check out the proposed Pennsylvania Promise. Looking forward to it. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
Think of all the roads. Think of all their crossings. Taking steps is easy. Standing still is hard. Remember all their faces. Remember all their voices. Everything is different the second time around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1984. That was the day the Nestle Corporation agreed to terms in order to end a 7-year international boycott against the company. The boycott was over the unsafe and dangerous ways that Nestle marketed and sold its baby formula in third world countries. The boycott began in the United States in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It spread abroad to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, eventually reaching 10 countries. The campaign was largely grassroots in nature, with local activists organizing different actions. In Massachusetts, boycotters ceremoniously dumped Nestle products in a Boston Nestea party. Finally, after 7 years, the grassroots organizing met its goal. Nestle agreed to follow international standards for baby formula marketing. Boycotts are an important way for consumers and workers to protest corporate practices and social injustice. There have been several very influential boycotts in our nation's history. In the 1950s, the Montgomery bus boycott challenged racial discrimination in one southern city and helped to launch the civil rights movement and empower a generation to fight for equality. In the 1960s, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta of the United Farm Workers called for a boycott of grape and lettuce growers in California. That boycott helped to bring national attention to the fight to improve pay and working conditions for Latino farm workers in California. In the 1980s, a campaign against goods made in South Africa was a stand against that country's apartheid system. In 1984, the members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10 refused to unload a South African ship in the port of Oakland. Their action stood as a powerful statement of international worker solidarity for racial justice. Boycotts have long helped to change the course of history as citizens stand together in solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The Trump administration has slapped a 30% tariff on imported Chinese solar panels and solar cells. Both the Trump and Obama administrations accused China of subsidizing its domestic solar industry, but the Trump announcement is being met with criticism by trade groups representing more than 350,000 solar panel technicians and installers in the United States, who argue that the new tariffs will lead to job cuts and a reduction in overall investment in the solar industry. By contrast, just 38,000 Americans are engaged in solar manufacturing. The new tariffs on Chinese solar imports will be reduced by 5% each year until they hit 15% in 4 years' time. A new survey of media coverage of humanitarian crises has found that 8 of the 10 most underreported crises of 2017 were in Africa. That report by the aid group CARE found that the humanitarian crisis in North Korea was the world's least reported in 2017, with media outlets breathlessly reporting on nuclear and other matters, while some 70% of North Koreans are food insecure. But beyond that, humanitarian suffering in the African countries of Eritrea, Burundi, Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo largely went ignored by the global press. And so much for Egyptian democracy. The final prominent challenger to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi ahead of March elections was arrested on Tuesday and subsequently announced an end to his campaign. Lieutenant General Sami Anan is charged with breaking military law by running for office without permission of the armed forces. Other prominent candidates who initially announced presidential bids of their own have either been disqualified or backed down, citing intimidation by Egyptian authorities. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascist? Goodbye.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, going back to this higher education discussion, the question becomes, what do employers look for in moving to an area? We hear Republicans say, well, they want right to work state, they want low taxes. I argue that they want, 1, location, and 2, an educated workforce. They want people with the skills to be able to do the jobs that they have, and they don't have to go through a whole bunch of training. And you look at Pennsylvania, which is kind of scary. I mean, John hit on the U.S. News and World Report that ranked Pennsylvania dead last in state investment. Dead last. When you throw in all of those rankings that he went through, the debt, the graduation rates, the high costs, the fees, all of that stuff. You also look at the fact that Pennsylvania ranks 40th in the nation with adults 25 to 64 who have an education level beyond high school. 40th. Throw that into the mix that in over half of the counties, in 35 counties, the share of adults with more than a high school degree is lower than any of the 50 states, even lower than West Virginia. And you could make the argument that those 35 counties all voted for Donald Trump. But this is the thing, that the kind of educational investment that we need in this country, I don't know is possible in this legislature, which again is why I think people need to take these kind of issues and go, we can do better. We should be doing better. And because here's the thing, I mean, and this is what gets me, is we know that if you don't have an education, we know that if you don't have a college degree in this economy, if you don't have advanced skills, if you don't have a technical trade, if you don't have skills that are marketable, you're going to live in poverty. You're going to struggle to make ends meet. And you're going to be vulnerable. And even people who today have skills that are useful today, in 2, 3, 5, 10 years, those skills are going to be outdated. Which is why I've been talking about this for years. The idea of not just getting 18-year-olds higher education, but getting access to continuing education is so vitally important. And yet, again, we know these tsunami of problems are coming. We know the automation stuff is coming. We know unemployment's coming. We know it's coming, and yet our elected officials are doing not one thing about it. And that's what it's going to take us, we the voters. And we got to get candidates who themselves are going to be pushing this stuff. It's that important. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick